Folks, welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show. Company on Power Talk, thank you so much for making us part of your day today. And as I continue to traverse the musical landscape of our cultural history, the mid-60s in San Francisco provided an open door for creatives to come through, people that had the audacity to pick up instruments, maybe plug in, ultimately begin to experiment on their apparatus and develop their own sound. And for a lot of people, it turned into not just a hobby, but a livelihood. But this didn't happen in a bubble. It happened because that there were places, very avant-garde places of artistic enthusiasm that nurtured this. And I have had an opportunity to speak to some of the really great electronic music pioneers in and around the Bay Area, and quite frankly, in the country and in the world. And but they weren't working out of their homes the way people do it today. They were going to places like the establishment that my next guest had, the Tape Music Center, which provided a haven for creatives and musicians and authentic cats to come in and just have a ball and ultimately play some gigs and get some notoriety, and it all kind of stretched out from there. And as we move through the annals of history, a lot of this stuff tends to get lost. Things start at a certain marker, not recognizing that the seeds were planted years before. And at 43 years old, I realized that one of my jobs on this path is to be able to create a beam of light and understanding and knowledge about how things actually came to be. Ramon Sender, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you so much.
Ramon, I just wanted to ask you about, when you were before the Tape Music Center. I've interviewed a lot of guys that were guys like Vic Lovell, who was at Perry Lane in the early '60s, and Ram Dass was a psychiatrist, or he was in grad school, and Vic grew up in the '50s in San Francisco, and he said that it was a very violent time for people that were kind of off the grid, I hate that word counterculture, but there was a lot of violence. It was a very, very, very hard time. A lot of crackdowns. Some people would say that even if you were walking home with a flute or a saxophone, you'd get beaten up. Can you just paint the picture of San Francisco leading up to, kind of the psychedelicized 64, 65 range? Like, what is your interpretation of early Frisco, late 50s, that kind of thing?
Well, I mean, you're right. Psychedelics had been put on the list and enlisted, and were no longer freely available. So there was always a concern about the cops. They didn't impact us directly at the Tape Center because we were not all using LSD or interested in LSD, but I personally was, but other members of our group weren't. So it was a sort of a side issue there. I don't know if I'm answering your question directly.
It doesn't matter. You just go where your brain. No, I'm saying, but yet before were you part of the Bay Area scene in the late 50s and early 60s?
I'm sorry, would you repeat that, please?
Sure. Like, would you consider yourself part of the Bay Area culture and scene in the early 60s?
Yes, definitely.
And what were you, and what was that like? Because, I kind of pick up things with the trips.
Well, people were gradually coming around to wondering about psychedelics. One of the earliest events I remember was a show at the committee where we all of us in the audience were sort of looking around and wondering, has he turned on? Has he turned on? That sort of thing. And then it went from that to I began to get bored with our concert format at the Tape Center, and I was looking to do something else. I sort of thought, well, what do I really want to do? I think I want to do Sunday morning church in a new type of church.
Wow.
Maybe we'd sacrifice a cow to Mithras so people would know where their hamburgers came from.
Right.
And I mentioned this to a friend, and he said, well, you ought to talk to Stuart Brand. Stuart's doing a show called America Needs Indians, and he might have some input for you. So I got hold of Stuart, and and he said, oh, you want to do a Sunday morning series? Maybe. I said, yeah, and I need someone to do the sermon. And he said, well, let's go down to Big Sur and talk to the old man of Gestalt therapy, Fritz Perls. Maybe he would do your sermon for you. So we went down to the Esalen Institute, and I mentioned this to Fritz, and Fritz said, sermon? Are you crazy?
Wait, what was this cat's name? Fritz what?
What?
What was his name? Fritz?
Fritz Perls. He was the grand old man of Gestalt therapy, and famous for quite grouchy. Anyway, so we spent the weekend, and then came back to the city, and then a couple of weeks later, Stuart called me, and he said, you know, Kesey's in town, and he's talking about doing something he's calling the Trips Festival, which would be a full weekend of the best and most interesting things happening. Would you be interested? And I said, yeah, of course.
Of course.
I started collaborating with Stuart on the idea of this weekend and trying to get early things, and we were trying to figure out what groups to invite and so forth. And I knew a group in Berkeley called Open Theater that had been doing interesting stuff, so I contacted them. And by the time we got it together, it was going to be 3 days with two groups per day, and they would be the Tape Center and Open Theater and Stewart's America Needs Indians, and then I guess it would be, who are the others? Well, anyway, so in the meantime, Kesey got himself busted.
Right.
And he was on the front page of the Chronicle every day, so we couldn't have paid for better publicity. And he, let's see what happened next. Well, anyway, the energies were building, and Stuart and I looked at each other and said, we need help. We need someone to do the posters. We need someone to do the tickets. And I said, well, there's a guy named Bill Graham who just did a benefit for the mime troupe. That was a big hit. Maybe Bill would do it. So we called Graham up, and he said, sure, I'll do it. And I said, well, how much would you want? I'm taking $200 out for my fee, and Stuart is taking $200. And he said, well, pay me what you think I'm worth when it's over. So indeed he did. He did the tickets, he did the door, he did the promotions, he did everything. He really saved our ass.
Wow.
And we had this incredible weekend, mainly with the Grateful Dead carrying the weekend. The show by the Open Theater was good, but it was really created for a small space, and people really were not interested in listening. They really they did. I think they did a anti-masturbation lecture by Amy Semple McPherson, which wasn't quite the right thing for the crowd.
Absolutely not. I want to.
Anyway,
yeah,
so,
go ahead.
Basically, what happened is that each group was supposed to bring in a band, and so I brought in the who was the band that finally had? Oh, damn.
Was it Big Brother?
they brought in the band that finally had that great singer who
Big Brother
died.
and Big Brother and the Holding Company.
Yeah, right.
Janice.
So I brought Big Brother, but they didn't have their singer yet. So they weren't so good actually, and actually it was our man in charge who swept him off the stage and put the Grateful Dead up, and the minute the Grateful Dead started playing, the whole weekend came together, and the rest of the weekend was basically the Grateful Dead.
Ramon, that is such an important, and I want to be clear about something. I'm aware of the Longshoremen's Hall Acid Trips Festival, but you're saying a Trips Festival took place at the Tape Music Center.
No. It took place at the Longshoremen's Hall. We all were participating, but the hall had no PA, and so we had to actually build PA and install it, and that was done by Don Buchla, who was the inventor of the Buchla box for us at the Tape Center, which was the first synthesizer on the market, actually. And Don built this great PA system and hauled it up to the ceiling with the help of the Merry Pranksters, and that was what saved our ass in terms of sound there. This whole thing kind of Buchla went on then to design PAs for the Grateful Dead, and also for the work he did for us. But anyway, the whole event was in this circular auditorium, and thousands of people showed up. And when it was over, we met with Bill in a small cafe next to the Fillmore Auditorium, where he told us he just signed a contract with the Fillmore to do concerts there. He saw the writing on the wall.
Wow.
And realized this was the next big thing. Anyway, so we're sitting there counting the cash, and he brought it in all these little paper bags. He would just take the cash during the event and throw it in the trunk of his car. And so he's bringing in all these little bags, and we're counting it all out, and it's over $14,000. And none of us had ever seen that kind of money before. And
oh my God.
Took my 200, and Stuart took his 200, and then we decided together that Bill had done such a great job, he should get 600. And then we looked at the rest of it and said, what are we going to do with the rest of it? And we decided we'd give it to the Merry Pranksters because they had done all the heavy lifting. And so that's what happened with the cash. I think some of the bands might have been a little irritated that we didn't pay them, but they never were offered the money, and we just let it go.
And they were relatively unknown at that time. I mean, it was. I need Ramon. That story. I've interviewed Ken Babbs about 8 times. I've interviewed Dan Healy. I know what people were passing around jugs, huge canisters of ice cream filled with LSD. People were eating this. I mean, it was a wild scene. But what was this is the question.
LSD and the ice cream in the Kesey truck, and the word went around about that. I think I was probably the only person not stoned, because I kind of felt responsible.
Sure.
I was part of the main crew, and I thought somebody's got to keep his head together, make sure things are happening. So I was probably the only person there not stoned, or one of them.
Let me ask you. This is really important, because what I'm trying to get at is, what was prior to the Tape Music Center? What was the most avant-garde? Mills College had Luciani Berry. They had very experimental electronic music going on there. But I mean, earlier in the early 60s, what was something that you frequented? You didn't necessarily own it or run it, but it was something that was sort of the seed that led to. Was there anything that
Well, yeah. I mean, what happened was I was taking classes at the conservatory, and I decided I wanted to do a series I called Sonics that would be all electronic music. So I'd built a small studio in their attic. I mean, it was really basic.
Oh
It was just
my
a couple
God!
or
Wait, it's called Sonics. Sonic.
what?
What was the name of the program? Sonic.
Sonic.
How do you spell?
SONICS.
SONIC.
And
Yeah.
for the first concert, I invited 3 composer friends to come into my studio and create new pieces for the first event. And these friends were Terry Riley,
Oh my God.
Pauline Oliveros,
Oh my God.
and Phil Windsor. So they all came in and made pieces. And so for that first concert, we had 4 brand new pieces on the concert. And then once the concert was over, I said, my God, I've planned all these other concerts in the series, and I don't have any other music. And by then, I had connected with Mort Subotnick, or he had connected with us.
Oh my God.
He was teaching at Mills, and he said, well, Luciano Berio is going to be on staff. He just arrived, and he's got a suitcase full of tapes from the European studios. Let's talk to him. So we talked to Luciano, and Luciano said, sure, you can use any of these pieces on your program. So we were in like Flynn. We had enough music for the rest of the series, and we promoted them. And then we also decided we wanted to do live improvs, because Bob Erickson, who was the composition teacher at the conservatory, and he'd also been the teacher for Pauline, what was I going to say? Damn, I lost the thread.
It's fine. It's fine.
He was heavy into improvisation, and he got us all into improvising. So we thought, well, on each of these events, we should have an improvisation. So we did. We would, at some point in the concert, we would all get up on stage and play together. And then for one of them, I brought a tank of goldfish. And I said, this is the score. We'll each sit on one side of the tank, and if the fish are high, they're high notes. If they're near you, they're loud, and so forth. So the 4 of us played the fish, and that became a popular piece that kept being repeated over time. But also then Subotnick was working with the dancer Anna Halpern, and we got to know her, the people working with her, and we invited them to come along and join the improvisations. So we had 3 of her dancers on our program, and they were great. They were just hilarious. And they did very funny things. And
where did you build? Did you built the studio in the conservatory attic? Where did you build that little antiquated studio?
Well, I took apart the attic, and one night with a hammer and chisel, I created holes in the concrete floor to put wooden plugs, and then I could lay down a 2x4 for the bottom part, and then I nailed it down, and then I created a wall and walled off a part of the attic, which became the studio. And then I started collecting equipment, and I had a friend who had some old tape recorders, and I bought them from him. And then I had another friend who built me a small mixer who worked for KPFA. You know, it was just one of those grab a thing and put it together sort of deal.
No, but I just want to be clear. This was this was the building that became the tape center, or this was the conservatory?
This is the conservatory.
The people at the people at the conservatory had no problem with you creating a studio there?
No, I sort of, the director liked me, and he was kind of fascinated by what I was doing, and they were getting a free electronic music studio.
That's right. That's right. Oh my God! What? Dude, Ramon, you are making my year, man. We have a game on this program called name that voice. I don't expect you to know who it is, but I've done 2,000 radio interviews. I was transcribing this one last week, and that's when you came on my radar. So take a listen to this, and we'll come back.
And so we had done some work with Ramon Sender from the Tape Music Center on Divisadero Street in San Francisco, and it was very famous for electronic music. There's also the West Bay or San Francisco studio for KPFA. They had a room there that they had performances, various kinds of performances there, mostly electronic type music. The meme troupe sometimes used the room. And there was Ann Halpern's Dance Center, which was next door. So it was a very creative center. And we plugged in, or at least James Gurley did, to what's called the booklet machine. And that was one of the early synthesizers.
Don Booklet. I need to get to that cat, man. Yeah. I love that. I'm obsessed with that cat, man.
Yeah, I don't know where he is now. I think he's still alive, though.
He is. Babs.
And Ramon Sender changed his name, but Ramon is still around, too, although he's changed his name. I don't know what it is. But and then Pauline Oliveras, who just recently passed away.
Hard listening, deep listening. A beautiful cat. I know her very well.
Yeah, she was really neat, and she was there, but she didn't get involved with us. If she was there, she was in another studio, fooling around with these different machines. I mean, they had these weird keyboards that looked like tuning forks, and you make a connection with your fingers between these two tines, and it would make a sound, and you could change it with these different dials and panels and stuff. I don't know much about electronic music, but it certainly was very strange then. You could make somebody, make an instrument cough.
Right.
Make a guitar break sound like atomic bombs going on. Strange stuff. And so that was before the Trips Festival. The weird thing was that when we got to the Trips Festival, Ramon and the Tape Music Center was involved, but we didn't play through the machine. We just played a short set, and then we got off. Then we started playing, for Chet Helms, who took over the family dog.
All right, I heard you barking there. You know who that is?
No, I don't.
That was my interview with the legendary Peter Albin.
I'm sorry, with who?
Peter Albin. Peter was part of Big Brother with Sam Andrew.
Oh, great, I got it.
And so when he said that, I completely, I just had this huge flash. Ramon, I mean, like, who were the people that you? I just feel like you were the first cat. Bukla. I mean, obviously some of the cats were there too, but I mean, was there a forefather of electronic music before you guys in the Bay Area, or is it true that you were the first?
No, there wasn't.
There was not.
No. This kind of jumps forward in time a bit.
Go ahead.
We started at the conservatory, and after that first year of the Sonics events, I went to the director and I said, well, it was a big hit. We made a little money. How about a budget for next year? And at the word budget, he screamed and started tearing his hair out. Later, another composer friend of mine said, well, he was from Europe. You're supposed to barter. Well, I've never bartered in my life. So when he didn't go for it, I went to Mort and I said, look, Mort, you've got a cellar full of equipment. I've got an attic full of equipment. Let's combine them and take it out and do our own thing. And he agreed. And we knew a young man who was working for a construction company, who was kind of he was sort of like our tech. And he said, well, my boss has a house up on Russian Hill that we're going to tear down at some point, but maybe he would allow you to use it before then if you paid the insurance. So we said, great. So he went to his boss, we got permission, and we moved into this great old mansion.
Oh, my God. Oh, man.
And
oh, my God.
we had a whole year there.
Well, let's talk about that. First of all, that is so. And this was just called the Russian Hill Mansion. Was there a name that you put to it, or?
No, it was called the San Francisco Tape Music Center.
Okay, so it was the Tape Music Center before the actual building, though. It was in a.
Yeah.
Yeah. Got it.
Yeah, the building was just. The building had no name. I've tried to find a picture of it online, and the closest thing I can find is one that looks just like it, but it was listed as 2 blocks away. So I don't know. Maybe it was just something that looked like it.
But this was actually a residential place, though. This mansion.
A great old Victorian mansion.
Got it.
And it had a paneled living room with sliding doors, and then another room next to it. And in the room next to it, we put all our equipment. And then on the other side of the sliding doors, we had a room for about 50 people as audience. And so that's where we started with our series that year. And we decided for every event we would invite a guest artist to appear. So for one of them, we had, we had the Mime Troupe founder did an event. And for another, we had the famous poet.
Like Ferlinghetti?
No, not Ferlinghetti, but anyway, he'd written a masque. Oh, Robert Duncan had written it to be performed by his friends, so they performed it there. And let's see, who else was one of ours? Anyway, each event had a guest, and in between the guests, we would play some of electronic music, and we had a pretty good year. We repeated each concert twice because in those days you could actually get a reviewer to come to your event, and Alfred Frankenstein was the main reviewer for the Chronicle, and he became very enamored of us and gave us great reviews, and then we would repeat the concert 2 days later and get a whole new crowd in because of the review. And that was working very well, and the year went on, and then we had some people, we had some artists move in to live upstairs rooms, and there was a guy up in the attic, and he couldn't get electricity, so we had him on a long extension cord, and then there came a point where we were going to move. We found this place 321 Divisadero, which actually became our new home, and we were in the process of moving there. We'd moved all of our equipment over, and I was just there for one last time to collect the rent and kind of turn the place over to the other people. And he said, well, let's look one more time for where the fuse box is for the attic. So we looked around, and I found a fuse box, a subsidiary for the fuse box, and there was one empty slot for a fuse, and there were some fuses sitting there. So I popped the fuse in, and we looked up the stairs, and sure enough, there was lights in the attic. So feeling very self-congratulatory, we walked down. He walked me down to the front of the house. I was leaving, and then we looked up again, and there was flickering flames in his window. So obviously a fire had started, and he went rushing up to save his stuff. And I, at that point, we didn't have a phone there, so I had to go to the nearest phone at a store and call the fire department. And they came, and it turned into quite an event. The flames were leaping into the sky. It was night, and some of our Tape Music Center habitués came by and said, "Oh, so this is the last event you promised us." Anyway, the house was, they lost the roof, basically, and there was a lot of water damage, and the owner, the contractor, pulled a long face and said, yes, total loss. And he made out like a bandit on the insurance, I'm sure.
So let me. So this. I mean, I'm looking at I'm looking at an interview I did with Tom Constantin, and we're looking at, electronic music pieces as early at the Ojai Music Festival, UCLA Mills College in 61. When was the Russian Hill Mansion? 61? 62?
Oh, Lord. Now you're asking me for dates.
Well, no, because you know what? We know that the Trips Festival, Longshoremen's Hall, was 65.
Okay.
So, 60. When were you? I guess maybe when did you start at the conservatory, and when did you decide to?
I graduated in the conservatory in 62, I think.
So you had already built the studio in the conservatory, and then so we're probably looking like 63-ish for the Russian Hill Mansion.
Yeah, something like that.
And can you just talk to the audience and the people that are going to listen to this? And essentially the music, this is not like five cats in a band getting on stage. It's one person with a machine generating all types of different sounds, people plugging an instrument into the machine. If you could sort of flesh out from just the musical point of view, what was musical about it?
Well, these were prepared tape pieces that we would play, and then we realized quickly that standard concerts had a visual element, which was people could watch the performers, and we were lacking that. So either we were going to not have it, or we would do something else. And at that point, I approached a friend of mine who is a non-objective artist, Tony Martin. And I said, Tony, we need something. Before I talked to Tony, I had seen a show by one of the liquid projection people.
Bill Ham? Was it Bill Ham?
There were three projection people active in the city, and I invited them, first one and then the other, to come and join us to project their projections during the concerts. And each of them came once and then drifted off to do their own thing. Actually, one of them moved to Paris and was there for a couple of years, and then the other one, and then he came back and started his own thing at a theater on California Street that became ultimately a movie theater. But anyway, so then I approached Tony. I said, Tony, can't you do liquid projections for us? We really need, it's really perfect for what we need. And he said, no, I'm an abstract artist. I don't do those sort of things. I said, please, you can become our director of light director or something, and we'll scramble around and find you money. And finally, very regretfully, he agreed. And then he started doing these great projections for us. They're just wonderful, and they really lit up our concerts marvelously. And then it turned out when Graham contracted with the Fillmore, Tony started doing projections for Graham and making good money. So it turned out to be a paying gig for him, and he did us a great service. He lit up all our concerts. It was wonderful.
The cat before Tony, was that name Bill Ham?
Well, Bill Ham was one of the ones we invited to come and work with us. He worked one concert and then drifted off. And then the other guy's name was...
Yeah. No, what I want to ask you is, you're talking about, when you talk about tape music, can you explain what that is? Like what Albin said in that audio clip was, Big Brother didn't wind up playing through the machine, he said. So that's
I wanted that to happen.
Now I just want to know, because I need to get clarification. What for the audience, what is tape music, and then how would a band plug in? They be playing to the sounds of that tape. Can you explain?
Early on, there were two different types of music of this sort. One was called musique concrète,
right,
and then the other was called something else. And we didn't want to be tied down to that kind of thing. And John Cage had used this term tape music, and we liked it because it kind of covered all the basics. So we decided to call it tape music, and then we became the Tape Music Center, and we got our own place at 321 Divisadero. I rented that building, I think, for $150 a month, and it had an auditorium that would seat 70 people, high ceilings, and it had high ceilings other room next to it. And I went to Anna Halpern and I said, Anna, how would you like a studio in the city for $75 a month? She said, sure. So she took that, and then I went to KPFA and I said, how would you like a performance space in the city for $100 a month? And they said, sure. So I had the rent covered. All we had to do was make enough money from our concerts to pay the utilities, which we easily did. And we were off and running in this great space. And we were there for at least 3 years, I think.
Let me ask you, though, when John Cage coined the term tape music, you said it covered all the basics. What were the basics of tape?
It covered anything that was, it covered musique concrète, it covered whatever the other term was. Musique concrète was popular in Europe as a term, and the other term was God knows what. But anyway, it covered anything where you put sounds on tape and played them back.
You played them back. You put sounds on tape and played them back, and then the musique concrète, like Gordy Hormel, sometimes jazz cats would put the headphones on the other musicians and have them listen to the musique concrète and then respond to that. So it was like they were playing. Yeah, go ahead.
We didn't do that, but it could be possible. The thing was that we were eager to have a synthesizer built for us, and we approached this guy Don Buchla, who he claims he just showed up to copy a tape one day, and then when we found out he could build things, we kind of grabbed him. Anyway, he built us this box that became known as the Buchla box,
yep.
And it was a little ahead of the other guy who built the one that went popular. I forget the name. Anyway, so we had this box, and I brought it to the Trips Festival, and my dream was to plug Big Brother through the box, but that never happened. It was just so crazy. Everything was happening all at once. So we put the box up in the center, on the center scaffold, and various people fiddled with it during the weekend. There's one picture of me playing it, and I think some of the Grateful Dead people played with it. But it wasn't. I never got to do what I really wanted, which was to put the band through it, and then just very, very slowly move the settings so that the distortion would be gradually added until people didn't know what was, but people not really realizing it, and then until the whole thing was way out in space somewhere. That was my dream, but it never happened. Anyway, so here we are at this great space, 321 Divisadero. We've got great reviews from Al Frankenstein. We've got more than enough music to play from Luciano Berrio's pieces, and we're covered. So we had a number of great years there. Towards the end of it, I began to burn out, as I think I mentioned, and I began to think about doing those Sunday morning things. About the same time, Mort Subotnick had done his record Silver Apples of the Moon,
mm-hmm.
which was all electronic recording. And he got an offer to move to New York City and have his own studio through NYU. And he couldn't refuse it. It was too great a deal. So about that same time, I was getting more and more interested in moving to the country and simplifying my life. So that's what happened. Mort moved to NYU, and I moved up to Morningstar Ranch to become a hippie. And at that point, I left all of the electronics behind and went back to simple chanting and writing pieces that could be learned around the campfire and that sort of thing. So I changed my whole musical thing very, very much at that end and left it all the electronic stuff behind. But at one point, Buchla brought his system up to the ranch and put the speakers up in the upper meadow, separated quite far apart, and started his beeping and booping through the underbrush. All these hippies started emerging out of the underbrush, their eyes as wide as saucers. I think flying saucers had landed, actually. So that was a cute moment in time, but basically I was off to the races on my meditating in the redwoods and chanting Om and going on a new trip.
Were you first of all, is Buchla still with us? Is he still alive?
Was who still alive?
Don Buchla.
Yeah, is he alive now?
Yeah.
No.
He passed away?
What?
He passed away?
Yeah, he passed away some years ago.
Because I know Pauline left us, and what about Subotnick?
Mort's alive and well and living in outside New York City, and we Zoom together almost every week, chatting.
I was going to say, did you need to be? What were you going to the conservatory? What kind of music major were you pursuing? Composition. So I just want to ask you, we know bands like Big Brother, Jefferson Airplane, Grateful Dead. A lot of those guys came out of the folk aesthetic, and they just kind of picked up the instruments as skiffle players and got better over time and made careers. But I mean, when the machine first came in, did you have to have? I mean, how could you apply what you learned in school to the Buchla box? Did you have to be a musician or did you have to understand music theory to be able to operate this and generate wild sounds?
No, you didn't. See, the thing was, there was the composition teacher at the conservatory was a very unusual guy named Bob Erickson, and on my first visit to San Francisco, when I came out just for the summer, I contacted a composer here, and I said, "Who's the best teacher of composition out here?" And he said, "Bob Erickson." So I stored away the name. When I came back several years later to stay, I looked Bob up, and he was teaching at the conservatory. And my first idea was I would just study with him. But
right.
He took me into taking a full course to get a degree. So that's what I did. I spent 3 years there getting my degree and studying with Bob. And he was an amazing teacher. I mean, he would look at your score, and he would say, "Now that low G sharp, is that really what you're hearing there?" and he would say, "Well, let me listen for a minute." I'd say, "You're right. I don't think that is what I'm hearing there." He was into what became what Pauline Oliveros later called deep listening.
Absolutely.
He taught you to listen deeply. And Pauline, as one of his students, took that and created a whole program called Deep Listening, which finally moved to Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, where she was finally there on faculty, and they started a whole deep listening thing there. And she's gone, but the Deep Listening Institute continues, and it's an amazing thing she created, really. But it's all Bob. Bob's the one who started it all for us.
I'm just trying to get at the idea of like Jake Feinberg could just. I maybe the better question is this: like someone like Mort or yourself that had training or had education in the academy, were you able to apply any of that to these? They are now somewhat antiquated, but the things that Albin was talking about, the tuning forks and the sounds of guitars making, like, that idea of, were you able to apply any of the academic knowledge into the tape machine, the early machines themselves, or could you just be any kind of random cat and fiddle around?
What I always said is, for every year, I was way overtrained in my youth.
Yeah, I did.
For every year of training, I had to do a year of detraining myself. So the only really good use I got out of years and years, I studied with at least 4 famous composers as a teenager, one after the other, and I don't think I really got much out of it, except until I got to Bob. And then with Bob, the whole thing opened up for me, and I was able to really begin to listen to what was going on. So you can easily get overtrained. And nowadays, if somebody asks me, I said, look, if you want to become a composer, study another art form and get your technique and thrill out of that other art form, but approach your main interest totally open and willing to experiment and forget about the training.
I love that line. I love that philosophy, man. It's so zen and it's so spot on, and yet we live in this very control-based. I mean, what were your? Was your mind? How did psychedelics enter into this milieu? I ask only because if you had a 70-seat theater on 321 Divisadero, and I was coming to see a show, I wouldn't want someone like myself getting up there and jerking around. I'd want to see something sophisticated. So the performances were done by overtrained cats, would you say? I mean, or did you have a night of, like, where they'd have just jam sessions of people kind of just coming up and being weird? I don't know if I'd want to sit through somebody who...
No.
Yeah.
I mean, our own performances were carefully planned and carefully done, and all our people. I was probably the one most interested in psychedelics, and I certainly never got up on stage stoned. But for me, I went by Ram Dass's set and setting. If I was going to drop LSD, I want to be out in the country in a beautiful place, all of that. Anyway, but I did get interested in psychedelics, and then it was partially my early experiences with them that moved me gradually towards living in the country. And one of the people who interviewed us for the Trips Festival was Lou Gottlieb of the Limelighters, who was taking time out from the group after a near-fatal plane accident, and he'd been given a job by the Chronicle reviewing concerts, and he interviewed us about the Trips Festival and wrote a cute little article for the paper. And but in the process of our chat, he mentioned, I mentioned that I'd lived in community, in a strange community at one point in my early 20s, but that I was interested in community. And he said, well, if you ever get interested again, I have a place up in the country, and there's nothing happening there. Maybe we could talk about it. So when I came back from everything else that was going on, well, actually, after the Trips Festival, I decided I needed to take some time out. So I drove, I drove all up to New Mexico and back, visited the only commune I'd ever heard of, Drop City, and also some other people who were friends. And then I drove back, and then at that point, I took my girlfriend and decided, well, I'd done a 2-week retreat up on Mount Tam at one point, and I wanted to show her where that was. So I took her up there, and we were shooed out by the forest ranger. And at that point, she said, "Well, you remember that guy Lou Gottlieb? He said he had a place up in the country. Maybe we could go up there to play Adam and Eve." So I called Lou up, and he said, "Sure, we'll go up." So we drove up together. He had a pocket full of hashish cookies from the famous friend of his, famous for hash cookies. And let's see, it was him and me and my girlfriend and who else? I think it was...
Like Albert Saidu or something?
Theater couple who would become friends, the Jacopettis. And we all drove up together, and it was apple blossom time, and the trees were in blossom, and oh my God, the place was gorgeous. I said, "This is it. This is where I'm staying." Wow. So I started living there, and my girlfriend was teaching in high school, and she only could come up weekends. And then Lou started getting into the act. He said, "I may move up here too." So he got the place had been an egg ranch, and so there was this egg house to store eggs, and he had a carpenter friend of his renovate it so he could move in his Berzendorfer Grand, which took up practically there's just about enough room for a Berzendorfer and a mattress. And that's how he moved in. In the meantime, I'm up there meditating in the small redwood grove, and Lou would come by with friends and come to the grove and said, "And this is our advanced seminar," and I'd be lying there conked out in the middle of the grove, staring at the sun branches.
And that was the advanced seminar. So you were deeply ensconced in. Can you talk about a seminal? You said that some of your early experiences on psychedelics sort of gave you an understanding that you wanted to become more of a set and setting guy. I mean, can you talk about it?
They were doing a lot for me. They were opening me up to this whole other reality that was one I'd never experienced before.
Can you describe it?
Well, what I realized was that the sun was God, and all religions stemmed from that one basic fact. Wow. And if you couldn't understand that the sun was God, you were out in some kind of weird space that was not really true. And so I started off there and went on from there. And as the Jacopettis moved up and joined us with their child, and then Bruce Bailey, the movie filmmaker, who was a friend of mine, he joined us and took one of the little side houses as an editing studio. And then who else? A couple other people joined us, and then the diggers showed up and said to Lou, "If we take care of the orchard and gardens, could we have the produce to feed the hundreds of thousands of young people coming to the city for the Summer of Love?" And so Lou and I conferred and thought, well, why not? So they moved in, and when the diggers moved in, the whole scene changed. Because suddenly we went from a quiet, meditative group to these guys who were into building their own structures and out of nothing, and basically feeding the world for free. So with the arrival of the diggers, everything went through a transformation. We learned later they had a sign at the free store, their digger free store in the city, saying, "Come up and visit the digger ranch." So we began to get a stream of people. And we went from a base group of maybe 14 to 40 in a month, and then from there to 80 in another month, and the place began to fill up. And not only that, the toilets got clogged, and everything kind of went downhill. And then the county narcotics guy showed up and looked around and said, "Hey, this is kind of a neat place to drop acid, isn't it?" And we all went, Anyway, we obviously were on their map from then on. And it went from one visit to two visits to then what was called the April Fool's Bust. We got word, there was a guy in jail in Santa Rosa who they sent out to set us up. And he was very nice. He said, I've been set out here to set you up, and there's going to be a bust on April Fool's. So we immediately turned them on, of course, and patted them gratefully, and clear the place of any psychedelics so that when the guys did move in on April 1st, there was nothing there except they sniffed Lou Gottlieb's leather pouch that was empty and said, I think I smell marijuana. And what else? I think, there was one guy who had an old thing of speed in his wallet he forgot to take out, and that was it. And that was the bust. But we were definitely on the map from then on.
I want to read you this. It's such an honor to talk to Ramon Sender. Not only, just your ability to articulate stuff that happened more than half a century ago is stunning to me. I just want to read you this. It said the Buchla synthesizer at Mills College was always
what happened is we moved.
Let me just read this. Let me just read this to you, and then you can go off. This is from. Why am I blanking on the guy's name now?
When Mort moved to NYU and I moved to the country, we moved the Buchla box to Mills. Yeah, so this is from Bernie Krause. When I interviewed him, he said the Buchla synthesizer at Mills was always failing. An oscillator didn't work on the spring reverb, or the filter didn't work. I had always had problems.
Something didn't work with the Buchla at any given time. I would be there. There was no chance in hell I was going to perform live with that instrument. It was stationary and mostly in the studio. Now that was Paul Beaver, and that was Bernie Krause and Paul Beaver. Did you ever connect with those cats?
Well, the Buchla box had problems, and Don was into fixing them. So over time, it pretty much decayed. But then a guy did come along who could fix them, and then he spruced it up for Mills. So I think it's probably in better shape now than it was then. But the Mills performing group, what happened was we were offered a grant by the Rockefeller Foundation. And that grant would include money for a performing group and for the center if we affiliated with a college. So the obvious place to affiliate was Mills, where Mort was already teaching. So we affiliated with Mills, and the grant moved to Mills, and the performing group moved to Mills, and everything went on there from then on. But that's kind of the evolution of things as they occurred.
Let me ask you. This is from. Did you ever cross paths with Dr. Patrick Gleason?
What about Pat Gleason?
Do you know Pat?
Oh yeah, I know who he is. I don't know. I guess I'm not on intimate terms with him, but I certainly know who he is.
Well, can you talk? Because he was there. He goes. It was in the air in San Francisco in the early 1960s. It was one of those moments everyone was there. By the time I arrived at Mills, out of Mills College, Terry Riley had performed there. I performed on the same stage as John Cage, different piece. I did some work with Steve Reich, whose music I still admire very much. I performed with Terry Riley and Bruce Connor's film Crossroads. At the same time I was doing all this stuff with Jefferson Airplane. Can you just talk about, from your point of view, you were a cosmic character. You were sort of following the muse. And then what was it like to have musicians want to participate in this. I mean, this is a situation when you kind of would lose control, not just through many personalities, but just the mere fact that the machines, the electronic music that you guys were making, was going to only be part of the equation. I just wonder, like, how were you ambivalent at all when you were approached by these? Because a lot of them were skiffle players. A lot of them were not professional musicians. They just picked up instruments and started to play.
Yeah, well, sure. I don't know what to say. I mean,
well, you know what it is. You know what it is. A lot of class. And again, you said you were over. What I love about you is that you said you guys were overqualified and you had to detrain yourselves. The stereotype, and it's a broad brush, is like, you know, oh, classical cats, they look down on other people, on other musicians, folk musicians. They're not, I mean, in some ways, like, there was no elitism with you guys, even though you know, Mort Subotnick, I mean, these guys are like, you know, shaman characters, you know, and I wonder if you could talk about, like, sort of that non-elitist approach, or if you ever did have some sort of snobbery, and if so, how did you kind of drop it?
I'm not sure I understand the question, but Steve Reich and I got our MA at Mills together, so we drove every week out to a seminar with the grand old man there, the Frenchman. What's his name?
The grand old man. Who is this cat?
Oh, he was their main guy at Mills every other year.
All right.
What was his name?
I'll look it up. Go ahead. Continue.
Anyway, we learned nothing. It was a nice time to chat with him, but he was not really teaching. I mean, after Bob's teaching, it was a real come down. But I respected him, and his wife said, "Listen, stay for lunch one day a week, and we'll sit in the garden and talk Italian, because my grandchildren are growing up in Italy, and I want to keep my Italian up. We'll feed you lunch, and we'll chat, and I'll pay you $20."
Oh my gosh!
There was this great lady. She was what's called a disseuse, which is a kind of a somebody who speaks in rather than sings into a program of some sort. And I can't remember her husband's name. I can't. He's oh, damn.
Is it Robert Anderson? No, that's it. No,
one of the most well known of the group called the Six, and he taught at Mills every other year for years. Anyway, so Steve and I used to drive out together for the thing, and we got to know each other, and we were living one hill apart in the city, and everything seemed pretty good, except later he kind of, I guess, didn't like something I did. I had a problem with a girl I was with, and he thought I mistreated her, and he kind of put me on the back burner, and from that point on, he's really not been willing to talk to me. So that's been going on for years.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, well, got his issues. He's become a very he's become a very, what's the word, a Jew whose practices. He's a very
Orthodox,
traditional Jew, and
Orthodox Jewish, yeah.
What?
Orthodox Judaism.
Yeah. Anyway, we're not on the same page anymore. But at that time we were friendly, and we went to these seminars with. I'm trying to back into his name.
I'm looking at Bob Erickson, Mills College. So this was before, you're talking about, this is before Erickson, and he was a Frenchman?
Bob was never at Mills.
Right. Bob was at the conservatory. So, yeah.
Guy,
yeah.
his name.
It's okay. We're going to get it. I mean, this is so insane. So I want to ask you a question. After you graduated and did you graduate the conservatory, or did you just hop out of there?
Yeah, I got a Bachelor of Music from the conservatory, and I got an MA from Mills, which is totally worthless, but that's okay.
Okay, but I'm just so when you went to Mills, this professor whose name escapes you was not, even though he was head faculty every other year, he was not helpful for you guys outside of his wife.
No, because his idea of a form and analysis class was to have somebody bang a piano reduction of Boris Godunov on the piano while he translated the text. That was form and analysis for him. Form and analysis with Bob Erickson was a very deep, detailed study of a work. So he was just hanging in.
I'm so sorry. I should have nailed this. It's Darius Milieu.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's what, dude. You know what, man? Like, that's shame on me for not knowing. I mean, dude, that's so Darius came up short for Ramon Sender as a teacher.
He what?
I mean, he just didn't do it for you.
Didn't do anything for me. I mean, I respected the man. He was in very bad shape physically, and in a wheelchair and in pain. So you have to respect him, and you have to respect his career, which was amazing. But as a teacher, he was lousy, unfortunately. There are other people who studied with him who gave him high marks. Maybe he was in a different frame of mind when they worked with them or whatever. But Lord,
I was going to ask you about the again. This happened so fast. You went off to Morning Star by 68, 69?
Yeah.
Yeah, because, I mean, Mort was doing records on Columbia I think also it was not NYU. It might have been Columbia University. I could be wrong about that, that he got the opportunity to, because they did a lot of electronic tape music coming out of that.
I think his offer came from NYU, but okay.
Okay. When did you ever see, well, I guess you did the Trips Festival, but then there were a lot of other Trips festivals. Outside of the Tate Music Center, did you perform outside of that facility ever, or did you see other people be able to pull off? Were there other venues that housed electronic tape music concerts?
Well, as far as I know, there were none other at the time. Individual composers were beginning to pull together their own studios, but no, I don't remember anybody. Maybe there were other other type festivals that I knew nothing about, but that maybe spun off in various ways. I don't know. As I said, there came a point where I was just up in the country.
And I'm just curious about, ultimately, how did you? I mean, talk a little bit about once you got up there. I mean, aside from having some sort of transcendent meditative practices, and the cat from the Limelighters saying to the people, "This is an advanced seminar class." How are you?
Well, I realized that as a composer, I had a tremendous opportunity to build music into this, what I figured was a new, a new community that we were forming. So I was busy creating chants that could be learned around the fireside, or songs that could be sung easily. I had an auto harp that I tuned the strings open and took the machines off, and anybody from the age 2 on up could strum it with a
no, but I mean, how did you? I mean, you're sitting here today talking to me, swatting away my questions with ease. 70 minutes in, once you pivoted out and became somebody who became more into mindfulness and seeking just enlightenment through meditation. How did you wind up singing for your supper? What did you do to bring in money?
I had one piano student in Sevastopol, and I also had a little money saved up, not a lot, but a little, and I managed to eke it out. We had pretty cheap food sources. Occasionally, a guy would come by with a crate of fish he caught, and Lou would treat us to a sack of brown rice. And,
dude, Lou, he's not still here with us, is he?
What?
Is he still alive or no?
Lou, no, he died.
Oh, Lou, man. Lou Gottlieb, man, he was like an angel. Man. He came from the sun, man. He came to find you.
Yeah, he was a great friend.
What were some of the albums that you can say were heavily influential precursor albums to Silver Apples? Like that's ingrained in musicology. Also, Indeterminacy by Tudor and Reich, playing in different rooms together, and I'm not even doing justice. What were some? It doesn't even have to be in the bag of electronic music, but what were some albums in the late '50s that really caught your ear and sort of gave you the impetus to pursue a career in composition and music?
Well, an early, I wouldn't say an album, but an early piece that got me interested in electronic music was Karl-Heinz Stockhausen's Gesanga der Junglinge, Song of the Youth.
Wow.
That piece knocked me for a loop. And after hearing that piece, I said, I got to get into electronic music. This is really... In terms of albums, I don't know what to say.
What were you listening to, because milieu was instrumental in a better time in his life with guys like Dave Brubeck. Were you into jazz at all? Did you? Because, a lot of the stuff that we're talking...
I was living in New York as a young man. I'd go to some of the concerts, and I'd go down to what was the place called, where some of those guys played. I heard, who's the guy who plays two saxophones?
Oh, my... Dude, we have to do set two, Ramon. You're talking about Rahsaan Roland Kirk.
Yeah, I used to go listen to him, and or the guys who hung out at what was it called, the Blue Note, or
the 5 spot or the half note.
Half note, maybe.
Oh my God! Wait, hold on. Ramon Sender. I detected New York. Are you from New York? Are you a New York cat or no? Where are you from?
I grew up in New York City. Yeah.
Oh my God. Dude, I cannot. But so you're telling me. You were seeing, you were also seeing Rahsaan before he was Rahsaan. He was just Roland Kirk at that time. But,
I grew up in New York City, interested in music, and I would go places and hear people, and, I was a young man with musical interests, and I would listen to everything I could get hold of. But I was born in Spain, and my sister and I came as refugees from Franco, Spain, and then grew up in an American family. So our beginnings were a little odd, but basically we were brought up in an American family in New York City, and the mother was very concerned about making sure we had great education, so we were very overtrained.
Your biological parents never made it with you? You came over with your sister, that was it?
No, my father brought us over and then left us with this woman and went to Mexico because he was dead broke, and he thought maybe he could get there was money for refugees in Mexico, and he was hoping he could start a business and then get together with us. But actually, I don't think he ever really wanted to get together with us because we were sad reminders of his wife, our mother, who had been assassinated by Franco because she was married to him, who was a famous left-wing journalist, and so they couldn't kill him; they killed his wife.
Why couldn't they kill him?
They couldn't kill him; they killed his wife because he was not within the Franco lines.
Oh my God!
But she was caught behind the lines. The last thing he said to her was, "If things get tough, go back to your hometown. Nothing ever happens there." So she took us back to her hometown, but it turned out to be in the hands of the fascists. And very shortly, she was imprisoned in a cell with 14 other women in a cell designed for 4 under horrible conditions. And they were just taking the women out one by one and shooting them. And there just came a night where they snatched her baby away from her, and she knew she was next. And the next day they took her out with 2 other women to the cemetery and shot her.
Oh, my God.
Anyway, we were survivors of shit. But we grew up in a very, what would be the word, upscale family. And the mother was a writer. She actually wrote a book about how we came to her. It's kind of an interesting book.
What's the name of it? What's the name of it?
The name of it is The Sun Climbs Slow, and it's a novelized version of our.
What part of the city were you in?
We were on Upper East Side.
Yeah, you were having a ball. Tell me that you went. Were you going to the original Birdland to see Bebop, like when you were a teenager?
Yeah, no, I went to Birdland, sure.
Well, who did you? I mean, are you kidding me? Who did you see there?
Oh God, you're asking me to remember things.
Dude, I mean, Ramon, you're blown. I had no. I'm like, does this cat? You had like a New York accent a little bit, but I was like, I mean, dude,
Birdland.
Bird
names, I'll tell you.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, Philly Joe Jones of Charlie Parker.
Charlie Parker, yes.
You saw Bird?
Yeah, I heard him. I know him.
No, I mean, I know you know, but I mean, did you see him live?
I saw him live at Birdland, yeah.
And you saw Miles?
Yeah.
Can you talk about, did that obviously, did that music, did you gravitate to that kind of music, or did you recognize what an absolutely hip subculture it was? I mean, I oftentimes think back, I mean, I'm 43. I was born in 78. I mean, I'd like to think that if I was hanging out with Ramon Sender, I'd be hip enough to be going to these places in the late 50s, early 60s, but I don't know. I mean, how did you even get hip? It was popular music, I guess, right? I mean, how did you even get hip to a place like Birdland?
Oh God, I don't know. It was in the air.
It was in the air. Thank you. That was it. Yo, before we wrap up set 1, I just have one final question for you. When did you meet the Merry Pranksters?
I met the Merry Pranksters during the Trips Festival.
You were not privy to Palo Alto or Perry Lane or anything like. So the first time that was the first time you heard Kesey's name was when he was on the Chronicle front page, getting all the publicity, or when did you?
Yeah. He got busted down at the Peninsula, and I heard about that. And I'm trying to think when I first met him. There was such a crowd around him, you know.
Always.
And I just wasn't into kind of hero worshiping, and so I kind of kept my distance. But I admired the guy, and I certainly loved his work. I loved his writing, and just exactly when I keyed into it all, I don't know. But
and did you know Owsley? Did you get your acid from Owsley?
I got it indirectly through Don Buchla, who was getting Owsley acid through his connection to the Grateful Dead.
Okay, so because Owsley was the one making it, so you knew Buchla, and Owsley would give Buchla acid, and he'd give it to you.
Yeah.
Wow.
Everything was sort of interconnected, you know. It was that sort of time.
I just wanted you to talk a little bit. I mean, before I let you go, even though I know you pivoted out and went to Morning Star and are probably still here because of the yogic path that you took, what would you like people to know about the significance of that incredibly fertile time in music, approximately 62 through 66, when electronic music was burgeoning and really at the forefront of this large sonic palette of music. You know, it was before the Summer of Love. The real Summer of Love was 66. By 67, all the invasion of outsiders kind of tainted everything. But what would you like people to take away from that period of time, and how did it impact modern American music and the world?
Well, we were all the different types of musicians were interacting and listening to each other and learning from each other. So it was a time of our minds were open to new things, and people were willing to listen and to participate and see where their next things were going to happen. So there were no demarcation lines between the different types of music or musicians. People were just out there listening to each other and willing to learn. So I'd say it was a time of learning, of interacting, and nobody had carved out a space for themselves and said, "This is my space, don't come here." And I keep hoping that's the kind of openness that we will continue to have as a culture and as a nation.
How you think we are still continuing on that path, or do you think we need it has to cyclically come back? I have a feeling everything you just described is somewhat anathema in today's socio-political climate, and I think it has a lot to do with the fact. I guess maybe the better question is, how has the significance of music changed since you were there? People were listening, people were taking it in, and society was being dictated in a lot of ways by the music and by what the messages were coming from the music. And that's no longer the case. And so I just wonder if you think that it's still alive today or that it'll come back around again.
Oh, I think it'll come back around again. People, thank God, people learn, and when something has been lost, they look for it again, and it'll come back in a new generation. I have a lot of faith in the younger generation. I think their politics are good. I think their attitudes are good, and I think they're going to save our ass and hopefully save the human race, because if they don't, the planet's going to wipe us out. As of now, the human race is an anathema to the planet, and unless we get our act together, the planet's going to say, "The hell with you, I'm through with you guys."
Can we do set 2? Can we do another part?
Do another part?
Yeah, another session. Yeah, I got some more stuff that I didn't get to, but we've been cooking here for 80,
well, if you want,
80
sure,
minutes. It was great. You are an absolutely iconic, legendary figure, and you're.
One thing I could is I wrote something at the Tape Center, which was kind of a position paper, I guess you'd call it, and it sort of summed up what I saw the role of the composer in the world at that time was. I could send you a link to it.
Yeah.
I guess.
Oh, I would absolutely be honored.
Do you have an email you can give me?
Well, we've been communicating on email. That's how we got together. So
okay.
So let's
right,
I'll email you to set up a time for part 2, and then you can send me back a link to that position paper.
Yeah, give me a kind of a week or two or something. I'm into a lot of stuff here.
No. We'll let this breathe for a minute. Absolutely, no problem. The only other thing I wanted to ask you is.
Thank you for having me on. I've enjoyed it, and we'll talk again. In the meantime, I'll send you some stuff. I just finished a 35-page book that I'm in the process of getting a company to print for me.
Okay, well, I want to ask you. I want to tell you something. This is really important, and I just want to throw it out there for you. I've just written in the last 2 years, after 10 years of sweat equity and 2,000 radio interviews, I've just published 4 books. I have a publisher out of Portland, because you know what? You'll be waiting for years for a publisher.
That's why I don't use publishers. that's why I publish myself.
Okay. Well, I'm letting you know if you're interested in having it coming out much sooner than late. I don't know if you're going to self-publish or not, but my publisher is phenomenal.
I've been self-publishing for years. Of course, I'd be interested in a publisher, but I don't like waiting 2 years, which is why I do it.
No,
myself.
Well, anyway, we can talk about that. One more thing before I let you go. Could you connect me with Mort Subotnick?
I can give you his email or whatever.
Okay. I mean, I just wanted to be able to do some kind of formal interview with him as well, and maybe you could talk to him and see.
Yeah, I could try. I could send someone to him.
Yeah, just it would be an honor, and it's a whole new sort of portal. But yeah, we got a lot to do, Ramon. So, but it was really an honor, and you made my day, man. Thank you so much.
I'm glad, and I've enjoyed it too. And we'll be in touch.
Thank you, sir. Have a good day.
Bye, Jake.
Bye. Wow, Ramon Sender. Thank you to Steve Kaiser. This is the Jake Feinberg Show. See you later.
Down that